Hi, so good evening, everyone. Can anyone hear me? If you can, unmute me, please.
Yes,
Can
I
anyone hear me?
can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Good evening, sir, and welcome. So, good evening, everyone. We're all welcome to class. I noticed that the turnout is a bit low, so I'll urge us to please go back to our party WhatsApp group chat. Just drop a message and remind your colleagues about class because at exactly 5 we're going to get started. So please, if we can remind our colleagues to join the class, please. Thank you very much. We'll start at exactly 5. So it's 5 already. Good evening once again. Good evening to everyone present, and we're all welcome to class. It's another weekend for us to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I want to especially welcome our facilitator who's already in the house and has joined this call earlier. Thank you so much, sir, for respecting time and being here on time. But before we get started, I would love to read a brief profile of our facilitator. Today, we're going to be talking about simplifying policies, economic, social, and sustainability. And before we get started, I'll briefly read the profile of our facilitator so we'll know who our facilitator for today is. Then we jump into the class. So our facilitator for today is Samuel Stephen Wabdog. He's a Nigerian economist, sustainability expert, and financial sector professional with over 2 decades of experience spanning commercial banking, public service, and central banking. His expertise covers economic policy, resource governance, research, history, environmental and social sustainability, climate change, and regulatory framework. He holds an MSc in sustainable resources, economic policy, and transition distinction, from University College London 2020, an MSc in Economics first class from Nile University Abuja 2016, and a BSc in Economics second class offer from the University of Jos in 2002, a recipient of the prestigious UK Chevening Foreign and Commonwealth Office Scholarship. He's deeply committed to evidence-based policy making, economic governance, and sustainable development. Sami is actively engaged in economic research, policy analysis, and sustainability integration. As a subject matter expert and faculty member, He's also involved in developing and facilitating ESG frameworks, sustainability and and climate policies and strategies from green and inclusive economic growth. Beyond his professional roles, he has contributed to various newspapers on economic and national issues. As a speaker, he has participated in high-level forums, including the African Development Bank ESG Forum, where he shared insights on building sustainable finance ecosystem for Africa. His contributions to learning, research, and financial sector development reflect his dedication to national progress and the global south. Sami also leads Qualifying, a social enterprise network intent on automating a policy dialogue by simplifying economic, social, and sustainability policies. He currently teaches economics for non-economists on Facebook, Sami Beth, and LinkedIn, simplifying the complexities of economics for a broader audience. I know that our individual mics are muted, but please join me in warmly welcoming our facilitator for today. Nobody else but Mr. Sam. So you have the mic. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Peace. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay. Are the other participants hearing me?
Yes, everyone can hear you, Sammy, and it's a pleasure
Good,
to have
good
you here.
evening, everybody.
Good evening, Sammy. I'm
My
really
privilege
happy.
to be here too.
Yeah, I'm really happy you can do this. I know we spoke about this a long time ago, 2016, 2017, if I'm right. Policify or
Yeah,
whatever. And look at where
yes.
we are now. So Sammy,
Been
it's a
talking
pleasure to
about
have you.
this. Yes.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I look
It's my
forward to the
privilege
class.
to be here.
I'm attending myself. I'm not too big to be in the class. I'm here. I'm learning. Thank you, Sammy. It's a
Okay.
pleasure, sir.
Yeah. Thanks for the honor, Kunle, and I appreciate your work and I appreciate your commitment. And I hope everybody here too understands how much you have put in both in terms of resources, material and non-material, for this class to hold over the past years. I have a simple job to do, which is just to simplify policies. I also understand that we might have I would have wished this was a physical class where you can see the people, know where they come from, know their background already. That will have helped us to understand a little of what they know about policies. But the good thing is that this class is not going to be a technical class. We are not going into the depth. We just want to be able to expose what policy is, the types of policies, just the what, the why, and the how. And I broke them into the different dimensions for simple understanding. We could lump them together, but it's better to have broken them into economic, social, and sustainability policies. Okay, sustainability is coming in because of the cross-sectional role that an experience that I have, but also because of the increasing need for us to integrate sustainability into the different types of policies. So I go straight to the. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can. Loud and clear.
I don't know why my screen is not. It's not moving, and I tried to move it. Lisa, it moved. Oh no. Okay. So this is the module objective. At the end of this course or this module, we expect every participant, at least individual participant, to be able to define a policy. They should understand, define a public policy. I want you to know the difference between the first and the second. Define a policy, define a public policy, appreciate the core concept of economic, social, and sustainability policies, learn how these policies are developed and implemented, identify the interconnectedness between these policy dimensions, and then explore tools to engage with either people who are into politics, people who have interest in politics, people who are politically aware, and even if it's for leisure, you just want to know what is happening. And it will be good for you to hold the government accountable, for you to contribute your own quota in either local, subnational, or national development, even international development. It's good for you to understand what policies, because policies rule the world to an extent. Anybody can wake up and decide a policy that has influence on you, influence on your community, your society, and generations even unborn. So if we are going to define policy, always remember I said, remember the difference between policy and public policy. And yes, in simple terms, policy is just a set of principles, rules, or guidelines that we formulate or implement either as individuals, as organizations, as institutions, as government. That's generally. So you can tell somebody will just tell you that the policy in my house that nobody comes after 9 p.m. Another person will tell you that the policy in my house is that everybody does their own laundry themselves. So you see, these are individual policies. We could move on to companies. A company policy is that you must resume 7:30 a.m. and nobody closes before 3:30 or before 4. That's the company policy. But then the government policy could be that everybody must declare its assets. Now that's the government policy. So this broad definition of policy does not consider whether it is individual, it is group, it is public, or it is government. However, policies also provide a framework for decision making, and it ensures consistency in addressing societal, economic, or environmental challenges. I will go back to my illustration using the company. Imagine that there was no company policy on lateness or resumption to work. That means somebody can resume at 7:30, another person can resume at 8:40. Somebody could come to work at 12. In short, I could come to work at 3:55 and close at 4 because ab initio there was no policy on resumption or on how many hours we need to spend. So if there is that policy, that is when you know you have flouted the guidelines, you have flouted the rules. And I gave an example of policies. It could be national education policy, like in Nigeria, we have the 6334. It could be a company's remote work policy. If we remember during the COVID and immediately after the COVID, we had what we call the new reality where people could work from. There are some policies. If you can remember, there was, I think that somebody that was either fired on CNN for the way he dressed to appear online. So in the height of the COVID pandemic and people were working from home, some people could even wear, let me say, clothes that were not professional enough, and they go online for meetings. So this brought about some remote work policies. Now I go to public policy, which I believe is something we are more interested in this cohort, in this class, and for the purpose of this module. Public policy refers to system of laws, courses of action, regulations, priorities implemented by a government to address issues affecting the public. I think the key words there are public, are government, again, you see public. So you do not make a private policy that becomes a public policy. Just imagine somebody makes a policy in his house that you cannot eat before 9 a.m. That's a private policy or a family policy. It's not a public policy. A public policy is one that is made by an authority, by a government, by people, irrespective of the system of government now, but it is meant for a general public. It is not an estate policy is not a public policy. A church policy, a mosque policy is not a public policy. When we are talking of public policy, we are looking at policies made by the government, made for the people, implemented by the government, evaluated by the people. That's what we call public policy. And that's why if you check my module, my learning objective, I started by saying understand or define a policy. Then I went on to say a public policy. Right now, as I said, it is formulated by a government at different levels. So it could be local government, it could be state government, it could be national, and in some cases, they could be international policies. Remember that international organizations like the United Nations, ECOWAS, AU, these are called supranational institutions organizations. So sometimes their policies are binding on member states. So if we have an ECOWAS court, we have an ECOWAS parliament, we have the European Union court, we have the EU parliament. When the EU make laws, it's supposed to be binding on member countries that have subscribed to be part of the EU. When ECOWAS make laws, it is supposed to be binding on ECOWAS nations. So these could be public policies. And then the key characteristics are government-driven, issue-focused, action-oriented, and dynamic. I don't know if I'm communicating. Do I have anybody that has questions? I don't mind you stopping me to ask questions so that the class is not boring, especially that we're not seeing each other face to face. So can anybody confirm if they are still listening to me?
Okay, sir, we're listening. I think how we do it is probably after the session, then we take questions if
No
possible. If
problem. I
maybe
just want to be sure that people are following me and, network, especially I'm not seeing what is happening on the other end.
okay,
But at any moment
okay,
that you are not following, please let me know. So
okay, sir.
there are stages of policy making, right? If you want to cook food, I don't think you just wake up and it's not magic. The food does not just appear on your dining table or in the plates. You will first of all think, your body will signal you that you are hungry, or you will decide that you want to make lunch, you want to make dinner, you want to make breakfast. So it's the same thing with problem identification. You identify whether as a local government, as a state government, as a federal government, as an international government. In this case, I've explained to you supernatural. That we need to make laws stopping people from driving recklessly on the road. We've noticed that reckless driving has caused accidents, needless deaths. So we've identified the problem, right? We've identified the problem. So when we recognize and define an issue that requires government or institutional intervention, that's the first stage of policy making. Two, when you identify the problem doesn't just go away. It's not something you can wish away, and it just doesn't solve itself. So what do? You prioritize the issue. Why I'm using the word prioritize? If you are a player in the local government or a player in the state, a player in the federal government, even if you do not actively participate in government at any level, being a Nigerian, have you ever imagined the number of things that the government needs to do? So the same government needs to provide education, needs to provide health, needs to provide roads, needs to provide security, needs to provide defense, need to service their airplanes or fighter jets. We have diplomatic missions across the world. So it means we need to take care of our embassies. There are many, many things. So how can a government that has identified 100 needs at the local level or at the state level or at the federal level take care of these issues? It just tells you that not every problem has the same intensity. Not every problem will be solved at the same time, at the same scale. So what do? It is expected that after a government or an institution identifies the problem, they sit down and prioritize the most important. If you remember, that's what we call some things are important, some things are urgent. So what do? You go for the urgent and important. Some things are important but not urgent. Some are urgent but not important. Some are important and urgent. Some are not urgent, they are not important. So I will think that if you are part of a policy making team, you are part of government, or you are a consultant, you are going to advise, even if it was not public institutions, that be it private, be it commercial, be it faith-based, you will tell them, come, we need to, out of the hundreds or thousands or tens of problems, where should our priority be? Based on urgency, based on importance, and even based on impact. Which of these will add value more? Which of these will solve pressing needs? Which of these will address the challenges faced by our people? So you prioritize the issues among the competing or various public concerns. That is what you bring to public attention. And then this also applies not only to the government people, but those of us in advocacy, those of us in literacy, those of us not trying to hold the government accountable. I feel there are many issues that is bedeviling the government. I don't think we will make any traction if we go ahead and want to say every day we are calling government attentions to all the problems. So if we see somebody openly defecating on the way, I don't think that is something we need to say we have to bring it to the attention of the governor, attention of the minister, attention of the president. Those are things that should not be treated at the very local level, right? At the very basic level. So what do? We look at the ones that we as individuals, as groups cannot solve. We don't have either the resources or we don't have the backing. Sometimes we need some legal backing to address some policies. As simple as building of roads. The Ministry of Works will tell you that you need permission. So you can't just stand up even if you have the money and we just go on the highway and start building roads. So for those things that are not within our control, for those things that are beyond our control, beyond our resources, beyond our might, beyond our strength, we cannot prioritize them and take them up. The ones that we can do, we do them. After you prioritize, what next do? You formulate policies. So at this time, you've identified a problem, maybe 10 problems. We have set an agenda and we say 2 or 3 are the most pressing problems for local government A, or 3 or 4 are the most important for state B, or 6 are very, very germane for the federal government of Nigeria. So if we are in any way policymakers or consultants or aides to these policymakers, or even civil servants, right? Or politicians that are involved in finding solutions or problems, the next thing to do is that we sit down and develop possible solutions or strategies to to address these problems or challenges. And it's not all policies that must be geared towards solving challenges. We don't really have to wait until we have problems before we develop policies or before we build policies. Sometimes proactive policies help address or prevent problems from occurring. After you do that, or after we do that, then we adopt the policies. This is the formal decision to implement a specific policy through legislation, executive orders, or institutional guidelines. All of us here knows who our legislators are. Even at the local level, we have local government legislators, the councillors. At the state level, we have state houses of assemblies. And at the national level, we have the National Assembly. Nigeria has a bicameral legislature where we have the Senate and the the House of Reps. I think the Senate is for equality, while the House of Reps is for equity. I know maybe people taking other forms of government will have described to you why you need to have a Senate. Is for a complex federation units like Nigeria, the United States, and few others. For smaller countries like Ghana, the UK, they don't need to have that. So but then Trump of recent has actually made executive orders to come to the fore. So all these are ways of giving legality to those policies that you have actually developed. After those policies are adopted formally by way of legislation, the president or governor gives it assent by way of executive orders or institutional guidelines, we go to the next stage, which is the implementation. This is where we have to put those policies into actions. You have programs, you have enforcement, you have mechanisms, you have regulations. And I get to say this is where we are lacking, both lacking and lagging in Nigeria. Most times they will tell you that we have beautiful policies, we have beautiful documents, but the problem is implementation. If for any reason I become a governor or a president today, irrespective of my predecessors' parties or ideologies, the first thing I will do, I will ask that at least, depending on how many and the duration, the policies of the past governors, assuming we are using a state, they should bring all and let's summarize and go through them. I bet you will find a lot of good policies, a lot of good ideas that time, effort, resources were sunk into, but they never saw the light of the day, their implementation. And I bet you if we revisit some of those things, they will address some of the issues we are facing. For the government, either the executive or whoever is in charge, implementation is where you put your best foot forward. And in these cases, since we are talking of multiple arms of government and institutions, we should put our best feet forward here. So if you are a local government councillor, if you are a local government chairman, if you are a secretary of a party, official of a party, if you are a governor, a president, if you're even a wannabe politician, I challenge all of us here. Implementation is where we put our best foot forward. At the agenda setting, problem identification, that's where we wear our thinking cap. Even policy formulation, that's where we sit down and really tie our trousers as well. But at the policy implementation, like I said, we put our best foot forward. And after that, we have the evaluation. Most times we have policies, and let's look at what they call now. Let's look at why we have abandoned projects most times. So we make laws, we make policies, we make budgets. And I hope you know budget is a policy. We will come to that. And nobody goes back to check. Okay, we say we are going to build 100 schools. How many did we build? We built 50, right? That means we achieved 50%. That's an evaluation. We said we are going to build 10 kilometers of roads. And before we got to the 7th kilometer, the first 2 kilometers are already giving way. It tells you that the quality of the project is poor. That's an evaluation. And what we don't understand is that it is a loop. So a loop is something that is round, right? It's something that is round. It starts with the identification, goes to the setting, formulation, adoption, implementation, and then evaluation. But before we close the loop with the evaluation, we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait for the project or the policy to end before we do the evaluation, because by then it will have closed the loop. We do it as we are implementing the policy. And that is what will give rise to adjustment. So when the policy is ongoing, when we are building a school, when we are building a road, when we are building a hospital, when we are making a curriculum, because it's not always that it has to do with fiscal structures, when we are making an education curriculum to teach our children, when you now get feedback that, no, this is not good enough, or this is too harsh, that evaluation, that feedback is part of the evaluation. Then we go back and modify. Where our bills of quantities, let me say, for construction was not good enough to take care of the quality, we improve. Where some policies are bad enough, we discontinue. So based on either the level of success, the level of failure, we're able to modify, we're able to improve, or we stop totally the policies that are either not making sense or they are anti-people or not progressive enough. If you go through again, I will repeat: policy, idea generation, that's the problem identification, agenda setting, policy formulation, adoption, implementation, evaluation. You will have gone through the policy cycle. Everything that has to do with making, implementing, and evaluating policies happens at the policy cycle. Then we'll take the types of policies. Remember, I started with policy generally, and I explained that some could be private, some could be family, some could be companies, some could be institutional. But our focus for this module is on public policy. That is the policies that is set by government, is implemented by government for the citizens, for the government, for the people, for a country, for a state, for a local government area or municipal area. And we can break these policies broadly into two: economic and social. But like I told you, the third one has increasingly generated more interest, and it has implications for the two, which also impacts on the two and impacts by the two. So there's what we call double materiality. Double materiality is how something affects you and how you affect that policy. So economic policies and social policies can impact sustainability, while sustainability can impact on economic and social. So it's a case of double materiality. And simply put, remember, the essence of this class or this module is not to tell you how beautiful we understand or we know policies. No. is to tell you or to simplify policy so that the person that has the least knowledge, the person that is least literate enough, should be able to understand like the ABC of policy, public policy, policy making, and that is why we are going to simplify it as much as possible. So, economic policies, I'll give examples. When they remove the fuel subsidy, that's an economic policy. When government decides to introduce universal basic education or free health coverage, that's a social policy. And when we have a green bond for a climate-friendly project, or when Lagos State says we have banned the use of single plastics, that's a sustainability policy. So you get to understand the three different types. Like I said, we can break these things further, but for the purpose of this class, we will leave these three. So, what's an economic policy? It's simply a set of actions. Remember, we define policies as strategies, as actions, as set of laws or rules. So an economic policy is simply a set of actions, regulatory body, to influence a nation's economic performance. It could be a state, it could be a local government. And these policies are designed to promote economic stability. We all know the implications of economic instability. Jobs are threatened, inflation is high, our means of livelihood is not secured, where people go to bed hungry, the number of poverty or people living in poverty rise. So economic policies are meant to address issues of inflation, issues of employment and unemployment, and income distribution. So you don't have a country where only 10 people are the richest and 90 people are very, very poor. That is what happens with income distribution. So economic policies is meant to make these things easy for us to address. We can target inflation, we can expand employment, thereby reducing unemployment. We can reduce income disparity. What are the key objectives of an economic policy or economic policies? Is to promote growth. Key objectives through GDP or job creation. Ensure stability. How do you ensure economic stability? Inflation control, exchange rate stability. I bet you the value of, for anybody, any 15 naira today or 50,000 in 2025, the value of his 50,000 is not the same with the value of his 50,000 4 to 5 years or 10 years ago. So that's why you need inflation to come under control. When the naira was 100 naira to a dollar, or 150 or 350, or today that is above 1,000, the value of your income or even the cost of goods and services will tell you dollars gone up, dollars gone up. So the aim of economic policies is to promote economic growth through GDP and job creation, ensure economic stability through by controlling or keeping inflation in check, and achieving exchange rate stability, then redistributing the income through taxations or subsidy. And that's why we have different types of taxation. Like two examples are the progressive and the retrogressive. The progressive is meant that the more you earn, the more the government taxes you, so that in that way we reduce the income inequality. When the government tax you higher for earning higher, that money goes to providing other services like education, like health, like roads, like security. But you also have the regressive tax so that we are not discouraging people for working hard. When we tax you less for earning more, we encourage more people to work. And when we tax you more for earning less, we discourage people from being lazy. So on the whole, this is a summary of economic policies. And as a way of feedback, I hope I've been able to explain what an economic policy is. Key components of economic policy, we will take one, monetary policy, two, fiscal policy. I know over the years, before now, Nigerians don't really care about monetary policy or interest rate or inflation because to an extent, we either had a fixed interest exchange rate during the military regime, especially during Abacha. Then in the first years of democracy, we had a bit of stability in exchange rate until 2014. So by then, we don't really care. You could go and dollar is almost at a certain price. You come back a week time. If it has moved, it has only moved with a naira or two, and which is negligible. But right now, the dollar changes its rate almost every day or every week. People have been more concerned in the past 10 years. Same thing for interest rates. Right now, because of the rate at which the naira also affects the other factors, the rate at which interest rate affects your cost of borrowing, and how high inflation has been and galloping, people are more interested in monetary policy. But simply put, monetary policies are policies managed by the central banks. I want us to understand this and come back to this. Let me go to number 2, then we'll come back. What of fiscal policy? Fiscal policy, spelled FICCAL, are government decisions on taxation, spending, and borrowing to influence the economy. I say it again, fiscal policies are government decisions on taxation, spending, and borrowing. So the central bank has no business with fiscal policy. It is not the duty of the central bank to make laws on taxation. The central bank does not tax you. It does not tax me. The central bank does not borrow. Hello? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
Okay. Okay. So central bank has no business with fiscal policy. So sometimes we mix it up. What central bank is interested in and concerned with is money supply to the bank, interest rates. That's why you see the central bank holds the monetary policy committee meeting, and at the end of the meeting, they'll tell you they have increased interest rate by 100 basis. Essence is to target inflation. The Central Bank of Nigeria adjusting the monetary policy rate to curb inflation. That's an example of monetary policy. Then the fiscal policy, removal of fuel subsidies. So when on May 29th, 2023, when the president announced the removal of subsidy, fuel subsidy, that's the fiscal policy. That has nothing to do with the central bank. Meanwhile, when the central bank changes the monetary policy, that's the monetary policy. It has nothing to do with the Minister of Finance, because right now the Minister of Finance is actually in charge of fiscal policy. So other agencies like custom, you notice when custom increase custom duties, import duties, all those are fiscal policy. When FIRS actually increases tax, like when the tax VAT was increased from 5% to 7.5%, that's a fiscal policy. So I want us to understand the difference. 3, we could also break these things further into the third one, trade policy. So when we have regulations on imports, exports, tariffs, trade agreements, they come under trade policies. But in a broader term, they can still make up under fiscal policy. But like I said, when we drill down further, we could separate this and call them trade policies. Like we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is supposed to facilitate trade across nations. Remember, we have a case where ECOWAS, there's supposed to be free movement of goods and services along the ECOWAS region. That's an example of a trade policy. We have custom unions, we have what you call custom areas, custom unions, we have monetary unions, like the EU. The EU is one of the highest form of integration. That's why you see they have the same currency, they have the same banking laws, they have the European Central Bank, and then the individual banks are just like monetary authorities. Then we also have the industrial policies, where we now set up with specific strategies that we want to boost economic growth, like export. We want to build I'll give you an instance. When Dangote set up a refinery at where he set it up now, that's an industrial policy. We could come up with policies to boost production, textiles. We could want to say the whole of an area. We want to make it agricultural free trade zone. We want to make it strictly for the production of, let me say, footwears, for the production of electronics. All this is to boost industrialization. So these are industrial policies. And I give an example of the Nigerian automotive policy that seeks to boost local production of cars. Then we also have labor policies. Any regulation that affects the employment, wages, workers' rights, minimum wage, all those are labor policies. And I want to look at a case study of an economic policy in action. So you have a farmer. Most times, I want us to also understand that agriculture falls under economic policy, while health and schools fall under social policy. A farmer, a cassava farmer, let's say in Ogun State, who is struggling with low yields or maybe high cost. And then the government introduces an agricultural credit scheme that offers low interest, single digit interest, 5%, 3%, 6%, just to reduce that high cost of servicing the loan or to give them access to credit. That's an economic policy. And what is the essence? With the access to these funds, this farmer that was struggling can now buy seeds, can now buy fertilizers, invest more in his farm, and his production will double. Even before then, he can hire more workers. So it's creating more jobs, is bringing more food to the market. It will affect our food security for positively. And that man that used to struggle, you'll be surprised, now becomes a richer farmer. So the policy not only boosts his income, but like I said, it will increase or contribute to job security and job creation, food security. So that's a case study of an economic policy in action. Remember, I said we have a farmer struggling. That farmer could have been in Jigawa, that farmer could have been in Edo, that farmer could have been in Anambra, that farmer could have been in Niger. That farmer could have been a man, it could have been a woman, it could have been a youth, it could have been a widow. And the key thing is that the economic policy here is the introduction of an agricultural credit policy. And we can see the outcome. When the farmer has access to funds, he's able to buy and invest more in his products or in his farm. What of social policy? Moving from economic policy, any set of policies or actions designed to improve our well-being as people, reduce inequality, or encourage or ensure access to essential services like education, healthcare, housing, social security. Unfortunately, we do not have social security or a mature social security in this part of the world. Any of these is a social policy. These policies aim to create a fair and just society. The key words here are fairness and justice by addressing economic and social disparities. So do not think that social policies do not have any impact on economic policies. Do not also think that economic policies do not have any impact on social policies. Remember, when fuel was removed, more monies went to the pump and more monies left our pockets, meaning we had less money to either feed. It could have been an economic policy, right? But it affected us socially. So these things have a way of affecting and influencing each other. What are the key motives or objectives of social policies? From my previous definition, it is, remember, to address economic and social disparities. It is to give us access to education or essential services. So the key objectives are to enhance welfare and equity. Equity here will affect us through the numbers of ways, so that I am not poor for life, or because I'm a poor man, I do not have access to anything. I'm not saying that I should have the same wealth that a rich man has. I'm not saying that a rich man must come down to the level of a poor man, or overnight a poor man must become a rich man. But equity helps us to bridge that gap. Welfare helps us to know that not everybody is strong, not everybody is rich, not everybody has the same means of production or the same amount of wealth. So we know that sometimes a rich man could fly abroad for his treatment, a rich man could go to a private hospital for treatment, but a poor man needs a public health care, needs a government hospital because he cannot afford private health care. And I also talked of inequalities. It could be gender, it could be income, it could even be, should I even say, it could be physical ability and disability. So the essence of social policies is to address. That's why you hear affirmative actor. You hear people saying they should leave or reserve 40% for seats in politics to the women. You hear people saying that no, it is not okay that you go to public buildings and there are no ramps. Meanwhile, we have people sitting on wheelchairs. How do they access this building? Key components of social policies, they include education. I've given an example. They include healthcare. I've given examples. One of the examples is like the National Health Scheme, Insurance Scheme. The essence is to bridge the gap or to make available affordable healthcare. We also have poverty alleviation, social welfare programs that take place at local levels, at state levels, and even at federal levels. Like Nigeria's conditional cash transfer was a program providing financial support to low-income families. You see, this has an economic dimension, but it's a social policy. Components of social policies, they could be housing too, where we have urban housing, affordable housing, sustainable housing. Everybody here, or most people should be aware of the Federal Mortgage Bank. There is this contribution called the National Housing Fund. By right, when you contribute to this scheme, you'll be able to get a loan to build or buy a house. Remember, we talked of labor and employment policies. This also falls under social policies because we are talking of people, right? We have the national minimum wage, and there is an act. That national minimum wage is to set a carpet. A carpet is a minimum that somebody should earn legally. It doesn't mean people should not earn higher, but it is just to protect the downtrodden, to protect the poor, to protect the lower people so that they are not exploited. Let's the way we look at the case study of an economic policy, we should look at the case study of social policy. I like to play with words, so I'm saying from street to school. So why this? I don't have a picture of somebody moving from street to school. I will love us to picture somebody that is selling on the street and underage child selling on the streets or begging on the streets, while his or her mates are in school, whether public school or private school. Do you think it is proper? Do you think it is necessary that every day we brand we are told that Nigeria has one of the highest number of out of school children? Imagine those number of out of school children being in school and they become productive tomorrow. And on the flip side, imagine those out of school children not having access to education and they turn out to be dangerous and harmful to the society. You see, it is not going to be for our own good or for our own children, for the good of our children. So from street to school, I want you to imagine a 10-year-old girl who used to hawk on the street of Jos, on the street of Lagos, on the street of Aba, on the street of Kano, because her family cannot afford to send her to school. However, through the government's conditional cash transfer program, her mother received financial aid on the condition that her daughter must go to school and go to school regularly. So that we don't abuse this conditional cash transfer. Conditional cash transfer is not supposed to be a political reward, or how do we call it, dividends of democracy. Most times, because people are poor, they cannot send their children to school. Or because people do not have a means of income or livelihood, they send their children to go and do menial jobs. And we are saying that this your child that hawks from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and comes home with 2,000 naira. We understand that 2,000 naira is very important for your family. Without that 2,000 naira, you won't feed. And we don't expect you to go to bed hungry and die of starvation. So this child becomes your breadwinner at so young an age, when he or she is supposed to be in school with greater prospects for tomorrow. So we are saying that if your child goes to hawk and this child comes back home with 2,000 naira a day, government is saying we will give you 5,000 naira. With this 5,000 naira, first of all, you can remove the 2,000 naira that your child makes that you feed. Then the school uniform, the books, and maybe transportation that your child needs to go to school. Another 2,000 naira. And if you are wise, you could save a 1,000 naira. Or the mother can now start a capital, start a business with that capital of savings for 1,000. So what conditional cash transfer does It is just a means to an end. It is not an end to itself. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 cannot take any family out of poverty. But we are saying rather than use your young child to become a breadwinner, let's take this child off the street and give you something that, one, will replace the income that the child was bringing for the family to eat. Two, from that same money, the child can afford to go to school. And three, if you work well or if you are prudent, if you are challenged, you can save some and start a business that makes you self-sufficient. So when we do this, and Menda's mom agrees, the child goes to school, and before you know it, she has finished primary 3, she has finished primary 6, she has gone to grade 3, and if the mother too has been saving, or the father too has been saving the small 1,000, the father now can open a small shop in front of the house, or the father can decide to go and buy a piece or lease the piece of land to farm, or he can open a trade, right? So, and one day Menda finish secondary school, and who knows, she gets a scholarship to the university, and who knows, she gets a job with the civil service or a job with a bank, and you see, she can rewrite the story of her family. So, from street to school, that would be a wonderful transformation. And I hope with this case study, I've been able to explain a social policy in action. I want us to have a brief activity. Of course, it's not a class. I would have loved us to discuss how personally any participant have benefited from or engage with any social policies, if any. But since we might not be able to discuss, since we are not in the physical class, or is not we are not responding now, I want us to think, at which point has any of us benefited from any social policy from the government, or were engaged in any? Either we have formed a policy, we have implemented a policy, we have evaluated a policy, or even giving government a feedback that this social policy is not working. I can remember a story. I think somebody just told me last year. There was this in Kenya, in a village or town in Kenya. It was supposed to be an agri policy, and these NGOs came and built like shades or rooms for livestock. But the next time they came, they saw the livestock outside and the people inside. So that was a mismatch. You come to a place where people are very poor, and because your program is a livestock program, you build a even if it is a single room, but has a roof, has a window that you expect cows, goats, sheep to live. Meanwhile, the people are still living in dilapidated mud houses that get to fall every rainy season. The thatch roof is blown out. Definitely, there is nobody in that condition that will put their animals in a brick wall with corrugated roof while they sit in a mud house with thatch roof. So we should be able to know whether these policies are right and they are meant for the right people. And I'll move to the third, the sustainability policy. Remember, I've explained to you that what economic policies are. Economic policies mostly are broken into monetary and fiscal policy. Monetary policies are those dictated by the central bank or monetary authorities, where they fix interest rates, they try to influence inflation, control money supply, or the fiscal authorities who try to increase tax, reduce tax, to either expand the tax net or redistribute income. We also looked at trade policies and we looked at labor policies. However, I thought of sustainability policies, and the aim of a sustainability policy is to balance environmental protection, social equity, and long-term economic growth. So what happens if we are only interested in building or with economic policies? We have factories everywhere in the corner of the country, of states, of villages. Yes, people have jobs. Yes, our economies are booming, but our environment is suffering. And when the environment suffers, we suffer. What happens? The fumes that come out from all those industries, we inhale them. Anybody that is familiar with suits and the challenges of suits in Port Harcourt some years ago will understand with me. When we cut down trees because we want to build houses for people, what happens? we have a case of erosion, we have a case of desertification, we have a case where the heat is not just bearable. And we all know that trees breathe out oxygen and we breathe in oxygen. So when we cut down the trees, we are depriving ourselves of opportunities of having more oxygen. But more so, trees store in carbon dioxide. When we cut down these trees, it just means that we are letting down out the carbon dioxide that were stored in the trunk of those trees. So the essence of sustainability policies is to balance that while we are seeking economic growth, while we are seeking social equity, we want to build houses, we want to build schools, we want to build public toilets. It will make sense to build public toilets that will come out on the road. The sewage comes out on the road or comes out in a facility near a hospital where sick people are living. And that's where sustainability comes in. This diagram, if you can see my cursor, the yellow has to do with economic policies. The essence is to achieve smart growth, cost savings, and improve cost of living. On this side, the pink is it pink now or purple? Is to achieve quality of life, good education, community development, equal opportunity, law and ethics. Where the social and the economic, if you remember your set theory, there is an intersection between the social and the economic. So when we're looking at economic, so that we are not just making economic growth, that's where fair taxation comes in. Then there is also an intersection between the environment and economic. That's why you look at sometimes when we remove subsidies, it is because we want to redirect people away from those sectors that are harmful. Like now, when we remove subsidy on electricity for those on band A, you see more people will go to renewable energies like solar, like inverter. So there is an intersection between the economic and the environment, intersection between the social and the environment, intersection between the social and the economic. Where the three meets, you see this green inside, that's sustainability. So we can have a just and fair social policy, we can have a long-term economic growth, and we can have an environmentally free and safe economic policies. Where the three meet, we now have sustainability. So the key principles of sustainability is to ensure economic protection, ensure the environmental protection and preservation, so that we don't wake up one day and we have nowhere. The environment is our habitat. Even animals need the environment, birds need the environment. Sometimes our economic activities, for those who farm, for those who go to other economic ventures, you need an environment. Imagine what will happen if I feed a man and you go one day and all the fishes in the river are dead. One of the issues again is social inclusion, economic viability. So you need these three to work together for you to achieve sustainability. Sophie, you want to say something? Akiwumi, you want to say something? Hello?
Okay, co-host. I don't know if it's possible from your end because of the network, so you're now the host.
You say what?
You can just go ahead.
Okay, fine. So let's look at the components of sustainability policies. We could look at renewable energy and climate policies. Nigeria has the National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Policy. The essence is to provide or promote clean energy. A country like Denmark already gets 50% of their energy mix from wind. So it is not like us here that we are battling with gas. They'll tell you gas is expensive, or there is shortage of gas, or this pipeline trunking gas to this generating company has been blown, or they'll tell you water is low in the dam during dry season. Two, we also have the waste and pollution control. In Nigeria, we are supposed to have the plastic waste management initiatives aimed at reducing pollution. But like I told you, we've got good policies, we've identified the problems, we've prioritized these issues, we've formulated the policies, but how much do we implement these policies? How much of these policies do we evaluate? In Sweden, they have a circular economy model that recycles 99% of their household waste. A circular economy is something that happens from end to end. Just look at it that when you get, let me use, you get a material from a raw material, for instance, that produces the plastic. Well, that's what you call linear. You know, linear is just maybe both ways. So you get this plastic, you use it, and when you finish, you go and trash it. You see, that's the linear economy. But in the circular economy, when this material, we have what you call domestic material consumption. When this material is originated from the resources, be it any input, the material is manufactured or produced, it has a lifespan, it is used. But after it finishes its lifespan, as far as that material or the product is concerned, it doesn't mean that's the end of life. The end of life of that resources is extended, and we could either recycle it or upcycle or even refurbish. So a clear example of reuse, people that use plastics, you buy a bottled water, you drink the water, and you take the plastic home and decide to put flowers inside, or you decide to put detergent inside, or you want to put anything inside. That's reuse. On the other hand, you could say this tire that is worn out, people customize these tires, paint them, and turn them into chairs, into tables, into swings. You see, you are recycling. You could refurbish. So by doing that, you are extending the lifespan and delaying when these products get back to the landfills. That's what we call dustbin, because they have implication. And I say in a country like Sweden, they've already achieved 99% recycling of their house waste. Then we have the sustainable agriculture and food security. Nigeria is also supposed to have a green bond program that funds climate smart agriculture. Meaning, if I am into climate smart agriculture, whether it is irrigation or vertical farming, or people now farm soilless farming, I should be able to have access to these funds. In India, they are doing a lot with organic farming that promotes sustainability, meaning less fertilizer is used, it is less harmful to the environment, whether water, whether land, or even the air. In Nigeria, Lagos has the bus rapid transit. You will not understand, but that BRT that we always hear in Lagos is a sustainability policy. Imagine that the BRT, the bus takes 100 people. Now, if these 100 people each have a car, that means without the BRT, 100 of them will have entered their cars and ply the road of Lagos. The implication is that we will have 100 cars emitting carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide into the air, as the case may be. But because of this BRT, about 99 cars for every 100 people that have cars that decide to take BRT, 99 cars are off the road, right? So it's a very good one. It will save costs, it will reduce emission, and to an extent, it will make us have a sense of inclusion. That means a man that has a car is entering a bus with somebody that does not have a car. Ordinarily, if the man that has a car always goes in his car, and the man that does not have a car always treks or enters a cab or a bus, they will never meet. So you see, with sustainability, there are economic considerations, there are social considerations, and then there are considerations for the environment, for the climate. Netherlands, which we call Holland, has a cycling infrastructure and electrical vehicles that reduce urban population. For those of us that watch TV, watch films, even the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, he climbs a bicycle and goes to work every day. But in this part of the world, you have a senator, a minister, a former senator that has 10 cars in his convoy, fueled on public funds. So apart from the carbon emission, you can imagine how much a ministry spends just to fund the vehicles and the convoy of the minister. How much a governor or a state spends to fuel the vehicles in the convoy of the governor. And I'm sure these days even local governments have that. So let's look at the fisherman's struggle and environmental revival. If you are a fisherman in the Niger Delta and you are facing decline in catches due to water pollution. Imagine that is your environment, that is your habitat. So some of us that live in the north will not face what we are facing. We are not even fishermen. So imagine that this fisherman needs to fish, catch the fish, that's what he will live on, that's what he will sell, make an income, send his children to school, pay hospital bills, and buy clothes. But he goes to fish, and every year in, year out, he was catching, let me say, 50 fishes per day. They dwindle to 40, 30, and some days he barely gets 10. How much of that fish is he going to eat and sell with himself and his family? Because of that, a new environmental regulation will mandate industrial cleanup. And if we achieve this industrial cleanup, within 2 years, fish population will recover, and it will improve both the livelihoods of the people and the biodiversity. You will get crabs, you will get snails. And for those of you that have gone to the south, you know, they love eating seafood. Even up north, there are places that serve seafood. So if these seafood are not available because of pollution, one, those of us that love eating seafood, we will not get them. Or when we get them, they are very, very expensive that we cannot afford. I know what it means. It affects your economic well-being. But for the fisherman and his family, it also means we are destroying their source of income. We are destroying their livelihood. And they might be forced to move away from that place because somebody has destroyed their environment. I would have loved us to have an interactive section where we will ponder on a local government issue, be it deforestation, be it environmental pollution, be it air pollution. But because we are not sitting in groups, I will want us to think, I want us to meditate and imagine what will happen if you live in a community that forests, if you live in a community that the forest is what you get your resources from. You log from the forest, you have cows, you have chickens, you even have birds that give you biodiversity. And a company comes, gets a leasehold from the government, either local government, state government, and clear that forest, 10,000 hectares, because they will tell you that they want to build houses for all. Most times, they even end up abandoning and not implementing this project. So we lose the forest, we lose the ecosystem, and we still don't get the jobs or don't get the houses. So after speaking on economic policies, social policies, and sustainability policies, I want us to look at how these policies overlap. And I'll take the case of fuel subsidy removal. So when the government removed subsidy on fuel, the excuse and truly what is supposed to happen is that government is supposed to make savings from subsidy. But when government makes subsidy, the savings from that subsidy, it leads to higher cost of transport, which affects you and I, right? But on the other hand, by the time more people decide to cycle because they cannot afford to enter their cars or enter public transport, or more people decide to buy solar and inverters because of band A, you see, it leads to a shift in cleaner energy. So what I'm trying to say is that economic policies, social policies, and sustainability policies, they interact and overlap. One can affect the other two can affect one, and in most cases, it doesn't mean all the time that the impact will all be negative or the impact will balancing trade-off. So you could look at it. If your objective is to maximize the economic size, I will give an instance again, like the first subsidy removal. You see, government went ahead because at that moment, the government felt it wanted to address an economic challenge. We were spending most of our income, revenue as a country on subsidizing fuel. But it meant that the government did not bother or did not care or did not look at the implication on social issues. So when you want to trade off, do you want to trade off the economic for the social for the economic for the sustainability, or the sustainability for the economy? Now, when you look at it as a government, as a policymaker, as a people, Your trade-off will determine how you go about implementing your policies, making your policies, even evaluating them. And I look at the case study. Let's look at a subnational. Subnational, I hope you know, as what we call state government. Subnational is a state government. So a subnational government introduces electric buses in a congested city like Lagos. While the initial costs are high, the buses reduce air pollution, right? Lower fuel expenses and create jobs in maintenance and charging stations. So let's go on. What's happening? What's happening? So let's look at the short-term versus the long-term policy goals. Public policy must address immediate concerns, but they should look at the long-term progress. Striking this balance is the one that is challenging, and that's why we're here. That's why we're learning today. Striking this balance is challenging. Sometimes there are political pressures, sometimes there are economic constraints. There are political cycles versus policy continuity. So we have a short-term electoral cycle. Some states now will tell you they will conduct election every two years. When you put a policy and in the next 2 years, a set of local government chairmen and councillors coming, and we are in a country that continuity is a problem. Most times, every time the new set of politicians come in, they want to start new policies, either because they want it to be their legacy or they want to make some money from the implementation. Also, infrastructure can be a challenge. It's not all the projects that can be completed in that 1 or 2 years. Then I look at economic pressures. Government will face pressures to address issues like unemployment, inflation, or crisis. So sometimes there is they have to balance between immediate hardship, like when they increased fuel and everybody was shouting, or investing in long-term renewable energies for long-term sustainability. There are public expectations and resistance. Remember, each time the government wants to increase fuel, what do? The labor will go on strike. There's also the issue of resource allocation. We could have limited budgets. As big as Nigeria is, our budget is not up to half of South Africa. And South Africa does not have half of our population. Same thing for Egypt, something for Algeria, and even Morocco. Then there are uncertainties. Sometimes when we're making policies, there are uncertainties. There are short-term issues, there are risks, there are, like I gave an example of climate change mitigation policies. You could make policies, and I'll give you an instance. I could make policies and you don't know that the climate will change and it will affect your level of production. I will give instance of the central bank's Anko Borat scheme. You give loans to farmers in Jigawa and there is a flood, or you give loans to farmers in Jalingo and there is a flood. So these are the things that affect your policy goals. Strategies to overcome those challenges. So every time we have challenges, we should look at the strategies as policymakers. And part of it is you can face these policies, gradually implement long-term policies while addressing immediate concerns. So you don't wake up and say you want to build 1,000 houses in the next 10 years. Or rather, the 1,000 houses you have to build in 10 years, you can start with 100 for each year. So after 2 years, you've done 200. After 4 years, you've done 400. After 7 years, you've done 700. You can also look at legislative safeguards. Make sure that these policies are enacted to ensure a continuity beyond the political term. So in most cases, if we respect rule of law and institutions, try your best so that these laws pass through legislation. Let them become acts of parliament. Let's not implement policies that we feel are what we like without going through statutory bodies. It is easier for the incoming or the successive governments to throw these policies. We should also engage stakeholders, be it policymakers, be it financiers, be it the people, be it even international organizations. Let's engage every stakeholder in policies. Most times we make policies in isolation, and when we are not there, people are very quick to dump our policies because they felt it was not broad. They felt it was not people-oriented. They felt it was personal. We should also look at evidence-based policy making. We should use data. When we wake up and we can prove that 100 people go to bed hungry every day, it's easier for us to now make a policy on how to support these 100 people. But you wake up, there are people that still argue that Nigeria is not up to 200 million. Because up to today, we have not had a credible census that even we can believe in. So how do you wake up and justify the fact that somebody makes a policies and says, okay, I can give you an instance of a minister that said they were feeding students during the lockdown. How true and how realistic was that? Make sure your policy is evidence-based. There are tools to evaluate these policies, and these include relevance. When you're evaluating a policy, you have a checklist. Is this policy relevant? Does it address a specific problem? Let's not look at policies that are ambiguous, policies that can just cover everything, but at the end of the day, do not do anything. Let's look at the impact. What are the short-term and long-term effects? So when you are making policies, when you're identifying projects, when you're implementing policies, just don't look at policies that solve only today's needs. And that's why I use the case of roads, that before we get to the 7th kilometer, the road is already bad. Let's look at the roads and policies that can solve immediate problems, but also have long-term effects. And when I mean have long-term effects, I mean positive effect. Feasibility. Can it be implemented effectively? I remember around 2009, I was watching the TV and the state governor, Niger state governor of there, who said he was going to build a hotel on top of Zuma Rock. Was that policy feasible? And you can see it was not feasible. That's why it was not done. Inclusiveness. Let's not leave the critical people behind. Remember, I just talked of stakeholders. So you want to make policy on girl-child education, but the girls or the women were not consulted in that policy. You have to go and make a policy or do a project in a village. You go and build toilet in a village that needs water, or you go and build a factory in a village that needs the hospital. So who factory that maybe the raw material is 1,000 kilometers away, how do you move it there? So make sure there is inclusiveness. Get the people involved. Policy should be bottom up. We just don't come and pass policies down to the people. That's why most times there is no buy-in. But when we sit down with the people, identify their needs, and also tell them this is what we want to do for you. We agree with what they want, or they agree with what we want to do. Then there will be a buy-in. And in that case, nobody is left behind. Sustainability. Does it guarantee future generations? So that we are not solving a problem and creating a problem. Imagine that we are able to destroy all the plantation in a place because we want to make money from timber today. What happens to the people that are going to come, the children that are going to come and live in that area 50 years to come, 30 years to come? So let's make sure our policies are sustainable. Why does policy matter? Why policies matter? Each time I discuss issues, whether it is economics, whether it is sustainability, I love to ask these questions, or I love to treat why policies or why that subject matter. Policies matter because they shape national development and governance. So from our local government, from our state government, from our NGOs, from our advocacy, from our activism, we can shape national development and governance. Most times, our political class, our ruling class, are able to get away with what they are doing because they know that we do not have a stake, because they know we do not have interest, because they know we don't have the staying power. There is no point that policies are made and people don't go for public hearing. When they write for memorandum or memoranda, people don't care. Until when these policies are passed in the National Assembly, then we will start talking or shouting, because apparently that is the only time we get to know that this policy is in the offering. But most times, we are supposed to be part of the process from the beginning. And that's why I started with that policy cycle. As the government or leaders or rulers or elites are already identifying the problems. In short, we should have identified the problems and brought it to our members. And that's the essence of having legislators. The legislators are supposed to be your representatives. So they should be able to say, this is what my constituency wants. These are what the people of our constituency have asked for. If we have, first of all, identified the problem, we have also prioritized the problem, then we can sit down and talk. But when we leave them to identify the problem, to prioritize, to make the policy, to design it, to implement it, then we will now come and start making noise. It will be too late. Policies also influence economic growth and societal well-being. Remember, we talked about monetary policy, and part of the outcomes or the essence of monetary policies was, or economic policy, is to influence or stimulate GDP, is to achieve economic growth, is to reduce inflation, is to reduce social inequality, is to bridge or reduce that income inequality, to actually ensure a fair distribution of income. So most times policy matter because they are supposed to, or they do influence economic growth and societal well-being. Policy also matters because it reflects the priority of government and stakeholders. In a country where we have party ideology, if party A is for, let me use the US, gun control, party B is against gun control. If party A is for increase in tax, party B is for reduction in tax. So you see that from the policies, it tells us the priority of the government. So in Nigeria, the government policy should tell us how much the government actually places value on their people. Is the government interested in making our lives safer? Is the government interested in making us access an affordable education? Is the government interested in making us access good quality healthcare? Do we have water? Do we have light? Do we have roads? How fair is the government in taxation? How fair is the government in remuneration? Do we have a situation where 10% of the population who make up the elite or elite class have access to 90% of the country's wealth, while 90% of us are all struggling on just 10%? So policies matter because they reflect the priorities. In making a choice for which party to join, which party to work for, which government to work with, the kind of policies and their policy leanings tells you whether they align with you or you align with them. If you look at the case study of the Nigeria's economic recovery and growth plan and its impact, that will tell you the priorities of the government at that time. But how do we engage in policy discussion? So it is not enough to learn and understand policies. We need to engage in policy discussion. And I'm sure what we are doing this evening is one of those ways. You know, what the Electoral College and Kunle have done so far is one of those ways to engage in policy discussion. We brought people and we want to learn how to understand what a policy is, why policies are made, and how policies are made. Now, when you know the what, the why, and the how of policies, you could engage in discussion. Because to be fair, you will not engage in a policy or in a discussion that you don't know anything about. So it is when you have that experience, when you have the knowledge, when you have the expertise, you can engage in. So first thing is to research and understand. Know the background of the policy and the objectives. And I keep saying, so when government says A, you cannot be able to disagree with the government if, first of all, you don't understand why this policy is in the offing. So it is your duty to actually research and understand. Then when you do that, remember I talked of evidence-based research. You can leverage on data. There are statistics. Right now, we all have smartphones, or most of us have smartphones. There are newspapers, there are libraries. You will see the numbers. So when you are arguing now that we have 50 million Nigerians living beyond poverty, I can quote a source. When we're arguing that half of our roads are bad, we can quote a source. That's statistics. When we are talking to our local government chairman or councillors or legislators or state legislators or federal legislators, we can be able to tell them, based on our research, based on our data, we have 5,000 houses in our community, but only 50 are connected to the national grid. we can show them that only 20 people have access to safe drinking water. We can show them that every year in our community, 500 people actually die from avoidable diseases that maybe simple immunization or locating a PHC, primary health care, will have solved. So when you have these numbers and data to back your position, you can make a case. And when you do that, you find platforms to engage in. We should have town hall meetings, public hearing, media and advocacy groups. These are the ways. So it's not enough to research and understand policies or the backgrounds of the objectives of those policies. It is not enough to understand or have the numbers, have the data. When you do that, you should engage. But before you even engage, identify stakeholders. Know who are the policymakers. Know who are the civil society, like electoral college. Know the private sector, like banks, like organized private sector, construction companies, manufacturing companies, and know the public. When you identify these stakeholders, also map out your communication strategy. Be clear, be concise. So you don't go to your legislator or your chairman or your governor and you came to ask for water for your community, but you're not able to present your case. So that at the end of the day, the governor seizes that visit and monopolizes the visit, and in short, turns it into a political campaign and start telling you, vote for me or don't vote for my opponent. When you come, please have your notes, know what you want to discuss, and be clear and concise. If you're able to do these 5 things, you should be able to engage in policy discussion. The first, I will reiterate, you should do a homework, a background study, research and understand. Leverage on data, use statistics. There are different types of data. Sometimes you can find this data online. Sometimes you will be the one to actually generate this data. If you sit at a market square in your village, in your hometown, you will know the number of children that pass to school barefoot every day. You write them down in the next 1 week. You can go and tell your counselor that an average of 50 students walk past this road every day and they don't have shoes. And that should be one of the reasons why we should at least grade this road, so that these children do not march on broken bottles, they don't march on thorns to school, assuming we cannot provide shoes for them. Because it must not necessarily be the work of the government to provide shoes, but it should be the work of the government to build roads, good roads, right? Then, like I said, whenever there are town halls, whenever they call for public hearings, whenever they say send your contributions through this email or through this newsletter, we should engage. There are strategies to influence policy. One, advocacy and lobbying. It's not always that it's fights. You should build coalitions, either among individuals, among groups, among societies. Two, engage the media. You use both traditional and social media to amplify your voice. And I know, like Electoral College is doing now, they are doing a lot of things online, whether through the social media, print media, electronic media. One of the ways of influencing policy. If today we have more than 100 people on this call, we are using social media to actually engage you. And it's one of the ways of influencing policy. I want to believe the people that have learned 1 or 2 things from here, when they become local government chairmen, when they become party secretaries, party PROs, when they become a special assistant on media or strategy or communication to their governors, to ministers, we should have influenced the way you think if we really taught you in this module how to understand or to simplify policies to you. Then there should be stakeholder mobilization. Time will come where we will need to mobilize. There could be votes, there could be public hearings, there could be demand. In short, sometimes we will need to march to the National Assembly. Sometimes we need to write petitions. All these are things that will help us. Then we collaborate with our community leaders, NGOs, and other groups and civil societies to do this. Then we participate in public consultation. You see, public hearings have been coming out. Provide feedback. It is not enough that we go to our politicians and we only smile. or when they give us maybe goat for Easter, goat for Christmas, ram for Salah, we come back. No, we should provide credible feedbacks. Remember, we talked of a loop. Those feedbacks go back into that loop and they can modify the policy cycle. Then engage legislators and executives. You know that the president, the governor, the chairman are the executives. We know that the councillors, we know that the state legislators, we know that the National Assembly members are the legislators. Engage your legislators, engage their aides, engage the executives. In this way, you're able to influence policy. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they are not seeing it from the point that you are seeing it. Engaging them will help them to understand the people's position, to understand your position. What are the challenges of policy engagement in Nigeria? I know we have limited access to information. In short, in Nigeria, it's very difficult to find information. When you go to public organizations, they will toss you around. Sometimes bureaucratic bottleneck. When you write a letter, we are supposed to have the Freedom of Information Act. When you write a letter seeking for information from a public institution, they will tell you to address it to this, address to that. In short, sometimes when you come, they cannot find your letter. They will tell you your letter, your inquiry is missing in transit. Also, there is the influence of special interest group. So when people feel your policies are not going to benefit their interests, and depending on their access to power, they could condone you off. We also have weak institutional frameworks. I talked about the Freedom of Information Act. If I write to organization A, which is a government organization, and this organization refuses to respond to me, actually, in short, the proper thing is that as a citizen, when I write to an organization, quoting or citing the Freedom of Information Act, if we had good institutional frameworks, strong institutional frameworks, that organization or that government entity should respond to me, right? But because we have weak frameworks, at times they don't respond and they'll tell you, do what you can do. We also have public apathy because each time we know that our government has not tried, or because we have tried and we could not succeed with the previous government, with the previous occupant of the office, we lose interest. And that's what we call apathy. We don't care. We are indifferent. Sometimes we are ignorant. Sometimes we are insensitive, and then we distrust government. So these are the challenges of policy engagement in Nigeria. But then there are opportunities for us to influence policy. And like I discussed the other time, we can leverage on technology. You don't need to go and queue for 1 week and they will tell you the chairman is not around. Come back, the chairman is not around. If you find the chairman's email or the local government's email on their letterhead, you write an email, you drop a letter in their box, you tweet at them. These are ways to leverage technology to influence policy. You could also engage with civil organizations and international donors. So if there are people that are donating to a cause, let me say on education, and you feel the government is not doing well, or these monies that come is not judiciously spent, you engage these donors. I want to believe the donors will listen to you. Give them your evidence and let them know we can do better in this way, or this is what the society or the community needs. You build partnership. So we have a situation where the academia is on its own, the research institution is on its own, we, the civil society, we are on our own. I think we should be able to build partnership so that the academia will help us in terms of research, in terms of so that we don't bring up policies that, imagine now we are trying to bring suggest a policy or a law to our legislator, and we take it and it is shredded because we didn't do our homework. That is why we need to build a partnership between the research institutions and academia, then use grassroots movements for collective action. Most times we have politicians, they will tell you that this person is a grassroots politician. They only know when to use the grassroots when they want to mobilize votes. But I'm telling you that when you want to influence policy, you can also use the grassroots, because these same politicians will come back to the grassroots to influence or buy votes. But if you have educated those at the grassroots, if they are very policy aware, policy educated, policy influenced, people will not just come and buy their votes. When the politicians come back, they can be able to sit down and hold them in an engagement. The last time you promised us a bridge, 5 years after, no bridge. Now you are coming to promise us a bus. Where will the bus pass through? You see, so we need to actually engage those at the grassroots. The roles for citizens in policy development: we can stay informed, we should be active, we should hold our leaders accountable. Practical steps again: attend workshops and seminars, join relevant groups, create a personal policy engagement plan. This is as individuals. Monitor and evaluate ongoing policies in your community. Then, the key takeaways from all I've said is that policy impacts all aspects of daily life, economic, social, and environment. When you simplify these policies and make them relatable and actionable, everybody will be able to understand and follow you. My call to action is that citizens should track local policies and actively engage in public discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful, expository, and educating session. Thank you so much. Though our time is fast spent, this time is for questions. If you have any question, please, you can indicate by raising up your hand so I can ask you to. And if you can't speak, you can as well drop your question in the chat box. Please don't forget that you should keep it short and put your thoughts together, wrap your thoughts together, keep it short. Others are waiting, so others will get to ask their questions too. So we're going to start with Akachuku. You can unmute and ask your question. So I think probably we'll take 2 questions then before you respond to them.
Okay, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening, sir. I appreciate you for this comprehensive masterclass. It's beyond even a section. Like, I've been able to learn a lot about. But I was even thinking like I know of policy, but now I know that there are depths. So thank you. So, like, a quick one, sir. My question is now that we know all these things, and we have been able to conclude that our systems and like institutions are not strong. So how can we be able to make these institutions that will like help us to like implement these policies much more stronger? So how can we now, like as the policymakers and the stakeholders in quotes, like maybe help to advocate for more stronger like institutions and then systems to implement these policies?
Okay, the second.
Oh, okay. Ejike Odenibo, you can unmute and ask.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. So I thank you for the presentation. A very nice presentation. So I have though I wrote this question earlier, that you have thrown more light. I want you maybe to talk on them again. Like you have told us the different kind of policy that we have. Then sometimes the policy and the effect come differently. So how do we balance it? Like how do the government balance these policies now, so that we can now have so that the whole policy can move in a particular direction without this one? Because tell us that the central bank take charge of the monetary policy, while the other policy is handled by the finance minister. So how can the government balance them? Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll start with the first one. The institutional issues, right? If I got to. From what I discussed, I looked at the challenges and I also gave some briefs. And so institutions do not exist independent of people, and they do not exist in a vacuum. The first thing to do is, I think we need to build our individual capacities, and this is part of what we are doing. So I'm very impressed that we will take our time to, first of all, join this electoral college, the politicracy cohort, because we want to learn And like I said, it is when you have the capacity that you can do things, build individual capacities, engage with people or systems of like mind, form coalitions. So when we have strong individuals with strong appreciation of those policies coming together now, so you see, we are now becoming, if you take a broom as a bunch, right? So if they can break us individually, they should not be able to break us collectively. Then when we now form a collective, even this collective can now have, so we can have 10, 20, 100 collectives. And these different collectives also integrate. And that is when we have those. So imagine in that same collective, we have those that are experts in law, those that are experts in policy, those that are even experts in policing, those are experts in follow through. Remember, I told you that most times we don't have the staying power, right? So when we have all this together, we can now demand for greater inclusion. We will demand a voice on the table. It is not enough that a policy is being made and then it will be made behind closed doors, especially public policies. Most times when we're able to participate in those public areas, when they call for memoranda, we're able to write and express our own opinions. The legislators will be able to take into account the people's views. And when your views are evidence-based, if I'm coming from a society, from a community, and I've pulled together the opinions and views of my community or village people, and my legislator knows that I am not speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for 100 other people in the village. If each of the legislators know that 100 of us are speaking for 100 people each, if you multiply 100 by 100, the legislators will know that we are speaking for the people. And they know that if they do not do what we want, right, it means there will be repercussions. So when they go back to the people for votes, the people will say the last time you did not make our voice to be heard on the floor, we will not vote for you. They will now start to take us more seriously. Then on the other hand, like I said, when we do our research, so that we're not going to give fake numbers. We're not going to go and say something after we've tweeted. Then we will now start retweeting and apologizing that, oh, this information we gave was false or it was error. We will give facts as much as possible, evidence as much as possible, and then they will take you more serious. And we hold those institutions accountable and responsible when those people know that you are actually on top of your job, keeping them on their toes. I think we can make progress with institutions. The second one, for the different types of policies, especially the economic, I talked of monetary and fiscal. So if you have a horse, right? The horse, imagine pulling one horse to the same horse. Instead of you tie a rope on both legs, the front legs, and one person is pulling it to the left, one person is pulling it to the right. Where will the horse go to? Or the fiscal and monetary policy, they are like a twin engine of an aeroplane. They are supposed to work together. So there is what we call policy synergy. The fiscal and monetary policy are supposed to work in synergy. So you don't have a situation where the central bank, through its monetary policy, wants to reduce inflation, right? And that's what we call expansionary, though it's not for this class, expansionary and contractionary monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy is when the central bank reduces interest rates, right? So that more money is in circulation. Contractionary is that we feel there is too much money that is causing inflation. The central bank now decides to reduce interest rates. But as the central bank is reducing interest rate, the government is sharing money through intervention. So you see, it becomes counterproductive. The truth is that the monetary policy and fiscal policy are supposed to work hand in hand. If we want to boost GDP and expand the economy, as the central bank is reducing interest rate, the fiscal arm is reducing tax. That's why we now have the policy synergy. Or the rate at which they increase the tax is lower. Fine. And then the vice versa. If the central bank want to reduce inflation, as the central bank is increasing interest rate, the Ministry of Finance through the FRS and the rest are increasing taxation. So the way to address this issue, AGK, is through policy coordination and synergy. Once that is done, they should be able to work in sync. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for the response. So we'll take okay. Juliet,
Hello, good evening, everybody.
good evening.
Good
Okay, my
evening.
question is, thank you very much, sir, for the facilitation. I really appreciate. My question is this: can a policy be enacted with a mere declaration, that is a mere word of mouth? And I'm asking this question based on the fact that even during your facilitation, you made mention of the president's declaration on the 29th of May when he was being sworn in, that a subsidy would be removed. And immediately there was chaos everywhere. People started withholding fuel and all of that. So my question is, can a policy be enacted with word of mouth by anybody who is a public servant, governor, president, and every other person across God? Thank you.
Juliet, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you hear me? Okay.
Razdan. Let's take the second person. Razdan, you can unmute and ask your question.
All right. Thank you very much, Sammy. Thank you so much for this very insightful masterclass. And I'll just go straight to the point. I have only one question, right? And it has to do with policy failure. And at what point do policymakers determine that a public policy has failed? And I ask this question because many times we see policy failures, but we don't see a reversal of these policy failures. So it appears as if the matrix for determining failure has not been determined ab initio. And so you keep doing the same thing, hoping, or the government would keep doing the same thing, hoping that at some point they would have some different results. And if you cast your mind back to only a few years ago when the school feeding program was initiated, at the time it was initiated, there were about 12 to 13 million out of school youths. 3 years, 4 years into implementation, where we were supposed to have a reduction in out of school youth, we had an increase to about 15 million. But the program kept going on. And so the question is, at what point do policymakers determine that this policy has failed and then they make a reversal? And so the other part of it would be during the development of the policy itself, do policymakers have a definition of what policy failure is so that they recognize it when they see it? I don't know if this question is clear. Thank you again, Sam. Very wonderful and insightful presentation.
Okay, let me take Juliet. I think, Juliet, so policies can be pronouncements. So it's not it's not all policies that are laws. Laws are the ones that will or legislations now will have been the ones that have passed. So if you see my definition, public policy refers to a system of laws. So laws are part of policies, regulations are part of policies, courses of action are part of policies, even sometimes we call them practice. So I'll give you an instance. If today you work with an organization and there is no written law that says they will pay you bonus. Let me not even say bonus, over time. But because your boss feels that you merit it, at the end of every day that you work beyond a certain time, he gives you, he decides to pay the staff over time. And I mean, not from his pockets. He tells the HR or the accountant, raise a voucher and pay these people for working late. And when consistently this thing happens, and over the years it becomes like a tradition, that's a policy. So yes, policies can be pronounced. They can be read. The only thing is that when these things happen, the proper way is to go back and actually document this. And why not holding brief on the president when he spoke? Because remember, the president already has the authority So public policy must be issued by somebody in authority that has the authority. I today now, I cannot stand up and say importation of rice is banned. I don't have the authority, except people that will make laws, sit down and make the laws. But as a president, he can actually make a policy pronouncement. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. You see, that's executive order. Although that one is more formal than pronouncement. You get my point. It's more formal. But yes, if it is policy, the ones that are pronounced, the ones that are documented, the ones that are legislated, the ones that are even regulated, all come together to form policies. It is now when we start distincting them from each other, we can say, okay, this was a policy passed by legislation. This was a policy made by pronouncement. And most times, so when the president reduce or rather remove what do you call it, subsidy, I bet you the NNPC will go and raise a memo, because before now, somebody actually gets an approval to import fuel at a certain price and sell it at a certain price. So when that approval is denied, automatically it gives life to that policy. Or the reverse is that somebody NNPC raises the memo and say, sequel to the president's announcement on the removal of subsidy, henceforth, fuel will be sold at. That's why if you notice, NNPC did not adjust their price immediately that day, till like the next day or 2 days later. I bet you they will have gone back and done the administrative part. So to answer your question directly, policies can be pronounced. I don't know if I've answered your question, Juliet. So I can go to Dan's question. Dan, if you can, I don't even know if you can see when I was talking about the stages of policy making. I said it's a loop, but around the loop, before the after the evaluation, I thought of adjustment. You modify, you improve, you discontinue policy based on their success or failure. I don't know if this is going to answer 1.5 of your question. And I agree with you. Most times, this is where nobody cares. In short, evaluation is even a big deal in this part of the world. We stop at policy formulation and adoption, then we implement haphazardly. Because if we evaluate properly, we will see that our implementation is poor, and we will go back and adjust. And in adjusting, so if the policy is a success, we continue. If the policy is a success to an extent, but we feel there are 1 or 2 issues, we modify. If there is room for improvement, we improve. And like you said, where there is a gross policy failure, we discontinue that policy. I'll give you an instance. If for any reason we are coming to save lives, and the drug that we are administering to people, we find out that that drug is even causing harm. So sometimes it might take longer, but it happens. So I will give you a case of NAFDAC. I know once upon a time, it was common for people to take chloroquine in Nigeria. Take, is it Analgin injection or Novalgin injection? But I'm sure over the years, seeing the failure of that drug or that injection, NAFDAC decided to ban it. That's the case of actually understanding, it's also an example, but that's the case of failure on that drug. And there was a need to discontinue it based on the failure. So to be sincere and to answer your question straight, the second one, most times, realistically, I don't see us in this part of the world actually doing this adjustment to the project cycle. Most times, government sees it like we must implement that policy. So when government wants to implement a policy, and that's why I say policies are supposed to be bottom up. The people to identify the problem, or where the government identifies the problem, we should sit down through legislators or through civil societies, on a round table, and like I said, this is what we need, this is what the government wants, and we find a middle course. But most times, government wants to force policies down the people like bitter pills. And so, once I am in party A and the people are opposing the government policy, we look at it like people, in short, clearly, they will tell you that you are against the party, you hate the president, you hate the governor, or people don't look at it that it's like I'm wearing a shoe that is tight. You are forcing me to wear a shoe. It is me that knows where the shoe is pinching. And I'm telling you that this shoe is tight. Please, I want to remove it or change it. But you are looking at it that I want to spoil your name because if I remove the shoe, it will be like this government is not strong enough, this government is not effective. So to answer your question, most times, if you look at sincerely, just take back from 1960 or from 1999. Apart from few times, I can remember when Obasanjo introduced a road tax, 1 naira 50 kobo in 2003 or 2004. That was when he demolished all the toll gates because the road tax was supposed to take care of what the toll gate was doing. There was an uproar from Labour, and that policy was reversed. So that will be the very few times that you see 100% reversal in policies. And the example you gave with the school feeding program, if there was this adjustment, then we'll have either modified, improved, or discontinued. And that's why when I was doing a case study of that girl from street to school, I explained that the essence of school feeding or the conditional cash transfer is not an end, but a means to an end. Most times we use school feeding or the conditional cash transfer as a political tool. We want to give our money to either our party faithfuls or we want to write that we're giving people evidence of democracy. But if we are actually interested in doing the right thing, we will introduce this adjustment and see where the policy needs to be adjusted or where it has failed outrightly. And there is nothing wrong in dropping a policy and going back to the drawing board and starting all over again. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. We have Juliet is still raising up her hand.
Okay.
So let me ask her to unmute. Yes, Juliet, you can go ahead.
Sanchez.
Juliet, I've asked you to unmute. Okay, she has dropped her hand. So Mohammed, you can unmute. Mohammed, are you there? I've asked you to unmute. Okay, I think okay, yeah, go ahead, Mohammed.
Good evening. Thanks so much for the lesson. We really appreciate. With the policy that you said, if there is a maybe gross failure of the policy, so there is need to withdraw. I want to ask, is there any time frame that we can look at so that we need to wait till we see there is a gross failure in any policy? So because I believe there will be a challenges in any policy that any government bring out. So and then if there is challenges, so it will take how many months, how many years to endure, or if the policymaker can look at it before they can drop it or make any adjustments.
Okay, so I will try to answer this way, and I will use economic policy, especially the fiscal and monetary policy. That's what we call in short, fiscal and monetary policies are mostly called stabilization policies because they're supposed to stabilize the economy. And then there's what we call automatic stabilizers, right? It's like you are driving a car on auto. It changes the gear by itself. When you slow down, those things that you do with manual, the car is doing it inside, right? The car is doing it inside. So the automatic stabilizers are inbuilt. They are inbuilt so that when the policies are not going according to what was planned, the automatic stabilizers adjust automatically, even without human or fiscal intervention. So there is really no time frame. But if we are serious and if you understand the policy making this thing, understand that there is a need for evaluation and adjustment, we will build in stabilizers in our policy, be they ordinary stabilizers or automatic stabilizers. So if you are going to build, and I will say a government has 4 terms. If we are actually serious and we know we are in a country where votes count, we cannot be actually making policies for 8 years. Every government should be looking at its tenure. the one that it has won. Do you want to wait until the end of your tenure to know that your policy has failed if you are really accountable to the people and if you really want to leave a legacy? I could say if you have a year, 4 years policies, depending on the kind of policy, I know some policies affect lives. If these policies are policies that can lead to deaths, you don't even need to wait for long. Once you have one or two incidences, you need to, it's just like pharmaceutical companies or even car manufacturers. The moment they notice that there is a brake failure in 1, 2, 3 or a certain number of their a model, they recall those cars. They don't wait until more cars are sold and more people die from brake failures. Same thing for drugs. The moment you notice, you withdraw them. So if I am the one, I will say, if I have a 4-year stint as a governor or president, 1 year is 25% of my tenure. And when I come in the first year, I could have taken that 1 year to even make a policy. It will take the second year to implement. So that means by the end of the second year, 50% of my tenure is gone. I should be able to say that if this policy does not work at the end of 1 year, I'm just giving instance, which will leave us with only 50% to actually make amends, because we will need to come back to the drawing board and introduce a new policy to correct the errors or the failures and even succeed, because our scorecard will be the success and not the failure. We should be able to say that we have a policy cycle that after every maybe 6 months or 1 year. Meanwhile, policies are supposed to be reappraised. If you have a governor, they're supposed to have weekly executive council meeting, at worst monthly. We should be able to appraise and evaluate the policies, especially when we start implementing them. So by the first, second, third executive council meeting, we should know the progression. So some policies might be slow in actually succeeding. We don't have a problem with that. It is to improve on the delivery. But whereby even the implementation already shows failure, I don't think you need a time frame. Yes, we should not discard every policy. So I agree that sometimes we could give a term of 6 months, 1 year, but it is not stated anywhere that you should have a time frame. The kind of policy to dictate, the impact of the policy, the implication of the policy, the casualty of the policy. Policy A might have more casualty. Let's look at this fuel subsidy removal, where everything went up the first day, the next day. There should be trade-off, and the trade-off is that the government should have quickly rolled out mass transit buses, even if it meant giving civil servants transport subsidy. One of the reasons was that people were diverting fuel. Now, if you are giving me the subsidy in my salary, remember I didn't say allowance. Before you roll out the mass transit that I will get affordable transport, that month start paying me transport subsidy. You understand? Those are the trade-offs, and those are how to handle policy impacts. I don't know if I've answered your question, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for that. We have another question in the chat. I think it would be yes, we have 2 questions, so I'll just read them out together so that you respond to them. Those will be the last questions we'll take for today. So Ponfa Yume is saying, even though many grassroots citizens recognize political manipulation, economic pressures often leave them feeling powerless. How can we build sustainable systems that help them resist exploitation and assert their rights effectively? Then the next question, sorry, I'm just trying to. Okay, the next question is from Maxwell T. Maxwell says, when a policy isn't implemented or ends up in a moribund state for physical structures and the problems, needs of the public that prompted such a policy still persist, what should be done? So those are the questions, sir. Okay,
so for Yume's question, I think if I get it right, is asking how to build sustainable system in the among the grassroots, right? To build resilience and make them what can make them that's to prevent them from being manipulated. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
You see, for them to assert their right. So you
Yes.
see, it is. I will still go back to the cycle, and it is the chicken and egg story, right? The chicken and the egg, which one comes first? So these people can decide to remain poor and go hungry, stamping their feet on the ground, asking that the right thing be done, right? In doing that, they will pay a price today, but I think they will gain later. Because when the people know that I won't come and buy their votes for 15 naira or for 500 naira, as the case may be, next time, so when you come and you buy votes and the people tell you, no, we are not for sale, our votes are not for sale, do this, do that, they might go hungry that night. They might go hungry that election cycle. But I bet you the next time, in short, people will hear the story, even other politicians that did not come that time or they are not contesting that time, will hear the story. And next time when they are coming, they will come with only tangibles that they can deliver, knowing fully well that these people are hard not to crack. On the other hand, you can decide to say, give us our daily bread today, because we don't know if we're going to live till tomorrow. And so the people will see you as cheap, and they will give you the immediate and go with your long term. And that's so my question is for the people to determine what they want. Just like we're discussing policy, the right thing to do is for us to stand up and insist. In short, the people are not even supposed to blackmail us. I mean, our allies or people that want our vote. Ordinarily, they should do the right thing and we vote in the right way. But we know that there are rooms or people that want to manipulate people. But I'm saying that when they come to manipulate the grassroots, year in, year out, or every election cycle, they come and share Maggi, come and share Omo, come and share spaghetti, come and share 500, but it doesn't address the problem. So I think the electorate, the grassroots should be wiser by now. Nothing that anybody will give you today that will last for the next 4 years, except for infrastructure, except for social services like education or health, except for employment. So the people should learn to ask for those things that are sustainable, those things that will last, those things that are real and shun short term. You know, you don't like I use the example, they want to eat today because they don't know if they are going to get tomorrow. But remember, even if they die today, they have families, they have relations, they have families. You know, somebody says if he flies as the Newton, it's because he's standing on the shoulder of giants. So let's make the sacrifices today. Let's stand our ground and insist, right, for the long-term benefit and not go for the short-term gains. I think Maxwell's question, when a policy, most times when policies are moribund, if I get it, how at the end of moribund, the issue is this. I don't know, please, can you read the second part of his question again?
Okay, sir, let me, sorry, just trying
if you
to
can.
get back. Um, sorry, I'm with you. Just a moment. Okay. So he said, and the problems, needs of the public that prompted such a policy still persist. What should be done? When a policy isn't implemented or ends up in a moribund state for fiscal structures, and the problems, needs of the public that prompted such a policy still persist, what should be done?
So that is where advocacy, activism comes in. In short, that's why there is room for you to recall your legislators. So if part of the failure was because, let's even look at really Nigeria, both the Senate and the House of Reps at the federal and at the state level, the National State House Assembly, they have committees. These committees are supposed to provide oversight. You have committee on practically everything, be it education, be it works, water, health, road, even revenue, right? So if the legislators are doing their work, they are supposed to oversee the implementation of these projects. And whereby they fail, we might not be able to remove a civil servant from his job, We might not be able to remove a minister since he serves at the pleasure of the president until other election. But there is room for you to recall your legislator, or you send a strong warning petition to your legislators. How comes you are in this committee, or you are in this Senate, or in this House, and a project that was was meant to benefit our community is abandoned halfway? That is one. Two, there is nothing wrong if the community treks or enters a bus. Let's look at the local government now, which is the nearest to the people. Goes and submits a petition to the chairman, who by right is supposed to be able to pass it to the governor or the supervisory councillors if it was the local government project. If it was a state government project, they have their National Assembly member. So the issue is that when these things happen, we are supposed to actually call the people we sent to government. We are supposed to call them, not necessarily recalling them, but we are supposed to call them to order, let them know there are implications for not doing this. Okay, if all the people die because there is no health care facility, or all our children are not educated because we don't have school, who are you coming back to meet for votes the next election? So I think what happened, and that's very part of, I also talked of collaboration. Remember, there's a place that say engage the donors, engage international communities. Sometimes these funds are donor funded. Sometimes they are loans. So government should not collect debts and not execute the program or projects. Most times, if the government does not listen, I bet you the international community, the civil society listen, exploit every other channel of making your voice heard. And that's why we talked of engagement, we talked of research, we talked of attending public hearings. People write in newspapers. I don't know if you are aware. People write in newspapers and stating that the state of their community is ABC, whether it's for good. But what we've left people that use that for propaganda. So you see somebody, because he's being paid, he write and he tell you he's a public commentator or public affairs analyst for so. Most times those people don't even exist. They are fictitious names or pen names. We should not allow people that are being used for propaganda to monopolize those media houses, whether electronic or print. Let's call into radio programs. Let's call out those failed programs, projects. Call out the legislators by name. Call out the executive by name. Let's write to media houses, write to newspapers. A project was donated to committee ABC, or they call it groundbreaking. A project was groundbreaking for the building of a 5-kilometer road was done. And since then, nobody has come back to site. Let's keep making noise. Let's keep talking. And at fora like this, where we sometimes we meet the executive or legislators at different fora, whether international or local, let's call them to account. Let's let them know this thing has been abandoned and your people are suffering. There are no roads, no bridges. For now, until the first question, until we're able to hold or build our institutions and systems where they can stand test of time, and government appointees or elected officials are not the ones influencing these systems, then the systems will work independently and there will be control of people and systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this. I think those are the only questions we have for today. So I think probably in 30 seconds, sir, if you can just wrap up your thoughts and give us your last words for today's class.
Yeah, my thoughts are simple. We will need to build institutions. We will need to build this country, and where we are now is the right place to start. We will need to contribute at the policy making level, either as policy makers, as policy contributors, or as monitors. We will need people that will keep our elite or ruling class in checks. We cannot keep them in checks if you do not know the what, the why, and the how of the policies. And my intention is that this class is supposed to be a foundation class. There are more to this policy making, policy monitoring, policy implication. There are more to economic policies, social policies, but this is supposed to be a launching pad that all those who are interested can go on their own. Thank God that we have technology. Thank God for internet. You could always read more. So if you might not be able to read everything, because this is broad. This is supposed to be an introduction. But if you pick an area that suits you, policy advocacy, policy identification, policy cycle, policy monitoring, policy modification, you can now go deeper and try to specialize. And I bet you, if you go online, if you check books, you will get more material. And who knows, by the next cohort, you might be a specialist to come and take one aspect of, or a specialized aspect of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this class. It's been, I must confess that it's been insightful for me, being someone who is also a policy advocate. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and then sharing these insights to us, right? I must say that when talking about policy, stakeholder engagement is something that is very, very important. And then going down to the grassroots level is something that we need to do. We need to engage them to know what the problem is. Of course, you cannot engage a policy you know nothing about, right? So in as much as possible, in as much as we're learning about policy, please let's practicalize it, right? We are the ones to really advocate for this, to really hold these people in government accountable. And then we must know these policies, we must understand them to be able to influence them, to be able to lobby, right? So please, as much as we have learned, you're not supposed to hold the knowledge to yourself. As we always say, try as much as possible to step it down. Share the knowledge you have gotten from this class today with someone. You can do that on social media. You can do that in your little community. Just start somewhere. Start somewhere. We have tons of information online, right? We can find information, we can find conversations around policy. Of course, I think there's even a tax reform policy engagement that is supposed to hold, I think on Tuesday thereabout, from the Presidential Committee on Tax Reform, right? These are conversations that we need to be part of. We need to add our voices to, right? So please, change begins with you. Start in your own little way. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time to do this with us today. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you, right? For our students, please, let's do this again. Tomorrow is another day. Let's try as much as possible to join the class for tomorrow. It's going to be another interesting topic, and then we'll have another engaging facilitator come share with us. Class starts by 5. We don't have to be reminding you to join class. Thank you so much to everyone for being in class today. Sorry for taking too much of your time, right? But I believe that it is worth the time taken. Thank you so much. Let's all have a restful night, and let's do this again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.